The wrench slipped from my oil-slicked fingers and clattered against concrete as my mother's words registered through the phone. "Your sister wants her boyfriend to make a good first impression, honey. Having you there would just complicate things." The garage suddenly felt 20 degrees colder, and my breath came out in visible puffs under the fluorescent lights. I stared at the half-rebuilt transmission in front of me, 3 weeks of meticulous work, while my mother's voice continued through the speaker, the same careful, diplomatic tone she used when explaining why I couldn't sit at the main table during family photos. My hands started trembling, leaving fingerprints on the chrome I'd been polishing. "My name is Hannah. I'm 31, and I'm a master mechanic who rebuilds classics that collectors pay 6 figures for. This is the story of how I finally stopped fixing what was never meant to work." The call ended with a click that echoed off the metal walls. I stood there, breathing in the scent of motor oil and cold November air, my chest tight with something that felt like drowning. 28 years of family Thanksgivings, and this was the first time they'd decided I was too embarrassing to include. I'd grown up as the practical one in the Morrison family. While my younger sister Chloe learned piano and practiced her pageant smile, I spent afternoons in Dad's garage, learning to read engines like other kids read books. Mom always said I was useful, the same way she talked about the good screwdrivers or the reliable minivan. Chloe was different. She glowed. Everything about her seemed designed for approval. Perfect grades, sorority president, marketing job with a company that sounded important when she said it fast. She walked into rooms like she expected applause and usually got it. I walked into rooms with grease under my nails and calluses on my palms, smelling like honest work. For years, I'd been their silent solution. When pipes froze, I fixed them. When Chloe dented her BMW, I drove across town at midnight. When Mom's credit card got declined at the grocery store, I transferred money without questions. I poured myself into that family until I felt hollow, thinking that if I just proved myself useful enough, maybe they'd finally see me as essential. But standing in my garage that night, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I realized something. Machines trusted me because I understood them. My family didn't trust me because they never tried to understand me at all. The next morning, someone pounded on my door like they were serving a warrant. After throwing on yesterday's coveralls, I opened it to find my entire family on my porch. Mom, Dad, Chloe, and a tall guy in an expensive coat who had to be the boyfriend worth embarrassing me for. Mom didn't even say hello. "Why did you tell Grandma Rose you weren't invited?" Her voice sliced through the November air. She called asking what happened. "Do you know how humiliated we were?" The irony hit me like a punch to the ribs. They were humiliated by questions about excluding me, but not humiliated by actually doing it. Dad stepped forward, shaking his head like I was a problem he thought he'd solved years ago. "You always twist things, Hannah, always making us look like the bad guys." Chloe crossed her arms, wrapped in a cream-colored coat that looked like it had never known dirt. "It's honestly unbelievable that you're doing this right now. You know how much pressure I'm under." But then something unexpected happened. The boyfriend, Logan, I heard Chloe whisper sharply to him, stepped forward with a confused frown. "Wait," he said slowly, studying my face. "Hannah Morrison? You're the one who restored that '69 Mustang boss, the one with the custom suspension work." My breath caught, not because he recognized me, but because my own family clearly didn't know what he was talking about. Chloe blinked rapidly. "What? No, she just fixes cars." Logan shook his head firmly. "She doesn't just fix them, she builds them. I've been following her work online for months. Your craftsmanship is incredible." The silence that followed felt like a held breath. For the first time in my adult life, someone in my family's presence was looking at me not as a tool or an embarrassment, but as someone who mattered, and they had no idea what to do with it. Dad scoffed. "You're joking." Mom frowned, clearly thrown off her script. Chloe's face flushed red from the neck up, the kind of red that happens when your perfect image suddenly cracks. "Your reputation in the restoration community is seriously impressive," Logan continued, his voice carrying genuine respect. "That transmission work you did on the Shelby, I showed it to my entire gearhead friend group." I watched my family's faces cycle through confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked like panic. Their narrative about me, the useful but unremarkable sister, was crumbling in real time. Mom recovered first, stepping between Logan and me with a stiff smile. "Well, that's all very nice, but it doesn't change anything. We came because we need to talk about responsibilities." There it was, that word that had been chained to my ankles my whole life. Dad cleared his throat. "The water heater is making that sound again. We need you to take a look this weekend." Chloe jumped in immediately. "And I need $3,000 for event planning supplies. You know how important my work parties are for networking. Can you transfer it by tomorrow?" I stared at her, feeling something shift inside my chest like a gear finally clicking into place. "You're asking me for money after uninviting me from Thanksgiving." She rolled her eyes like I'd said something ridiculous. "Don't be dramatic. This is separate. I can't have a cheap-looking event. It reflects on my career." Mom nodded sharply. "Family helps family. Or have you forgotten that?" The irony was so thick I could taste it. They'd excluded me from family, but expected me to fund it. Logan's eyes moved slowly between them and me. "Are you serious?" he asked quietly. "After everything you just said to her?" Dad barked. "This is none of your concern." But Logan didn't back down. He looked at me with something I wasn't used to, clarity. "Is this normal for them?" I didn't answer. The question hung in the cold air like exhaust. Chloe threw her hands up. "Can we focus? I really need the money, and Dad already told his contractor you'd handle the water heater. Don't make us look stupid." That word again. Look stupid. Always about image. Always about appearances. Something inside me settled, like an engine finally finding its rhythm. "No," I said. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry. It was steady, final, and unshakable. Mom blinked. "What did you say?" "I'm not fixing the water heater," I repeated calmly. "I'm not paying for party supplies. I'm not covering bills anymore. Not anymore." Silence cracked across the porch like winter ice. Dad stepped forward, his face darkening. "After everything we've done for you?" "You mean feeding me as a child?" I interrupted. "That was called parenting, not a loan." Chloe scoffed. "You're being ridiculous. You always help." "Not anymore," I said again, the words landing heavier this time. Mom's voice rose to a near shout. "We raised you!" "And I'm grateful," I replied calmly, "but that doesn't mean I owe you the rest of my life." The wind whistled between us, carrying their shock away like fallen leaves. Logan exhaled slowly, and I heard him mutter, "Good for you," just loud enough for everyone to hear. Chloe's face twisted with fury. "Why are you taking her side?" He looked at her with something that might have been disappointment. "Because she's not wrong." Everything changed in that moment. The family hierarchy that had held for decades suddenly shifted like a house settling on unstable ground. Mom's cheeks flushed, Dad's hands clenched into fists, Chloe's eyes filled with a rage I'd never seen before. "You'll regret this," Dad snapped, but his voice carried more hurt than threat. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. The kind of calm that comes when you finally stop fighting a current and let it carry you toward shore. "Leave," I said quietly. They stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. I said leave. Logan stepped back, not toward them, but toward me. It broke whatever spell they thought they still had. They left in a storm of slammed car doors and spinning tires, snow swirling in their wake. I watched their taillights disappear down the street, my heart steady, my breathing clear. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I belonged in my own skin. Over the next 3 weeks, I found myself truly cutting them off. No more automatic transfers to Chloe's account, no more emergency repair calls to Dad's house. The silence felt strange at first, then liberating. Logan called twice during that period, both times to check if I was okay and to let me know that he'd ended things with Chloe permanently. "I can't be with someone who treats family like that," he'd explained during our second conversation. 3 weeks later, on what would have been Thanksgiving, I threw open the garage doors and turned on every light I owned. The space filled with neighbors, kids from the local community center, elderly folks from the senior housing complex, and anyone else who needed a place to belong. Mr. Rodriguez from next door brought his famous cornbread. Mrs. Chen taught the teenagers how to fold dumplings. Little Marcus ran between tables with a paper plate piled high with mac and cheese, grinning like he'd discovered treasure. I stood at my workbench, watching families I'd chosen laugh and share stories, and realized I'd never felt more thankful for anything in my life. I was carving turkey when the garage door rattled violently. Before I could move, it flew open, and winter blasted in, along with 3 familiar voices raised in fury. Mom, Dad, and Chloe stood in the doorway, their faces red from cold and something deeper, a rage that had been building for weeks. "You humiliated us," Mom pointed at me like I'd committed a crime. "Do you know what your relatives said after Thanksgiving, after you abandoned us?" Dad stepped forward, jabbing a finger in my direction. "You think you're better than us now that you have your little garage parties?" Chloe shoved past them both, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Logan broke up with me," she said, her voice cracking. "He said he needed space from my family. This is your fault." A murmur ran through the room. The teenagers stared. Mrs. Chen pulled Marcus closer. Mr. Rodriguez slowly stood, his cane in hand. "I didn't make him leave you," I said quietly. Chloe's voice rose to a shriek. "You turned him against me." "No," Logan's voice came from behind them. He stepped into view at the garage entrance, snow dusting his dark coat. Logan had stopped by earlier that afternoon to help me set up tables, and I'd mentioned he was welcome to stay for dinner if he wanted. "She didn't do anything. I left because I finally saw who you really are." Chloe spun toward him, desperation replacing anger. "What are you doing here?" He looked at her steadily, then at me. "I wanted to spend the evening somewhere genuine. Your sister built something real here. And you?" His voice got quiet. "You never appreciated who she is." Mom gasped like he'd slapped her. "Excuse me." Logan ignored her, keeping his eyes on me. "I'm sorry you lived with this dynamic for so long." The garage held its breath. Even the space heater seemed to quiet down. Dad scoffed. "This is ridiculous. We're her family, not you people." "Family doesn't treat her like a utility," Logan said simply. Chloe's voice cracked. "You're choosing her over me." He shook his head. "I'm choosing decency." I walked to my toolbox and pulled out a manila folder I'd prepared weeks earlier, documentation I'd never admitted I was keeping, bank statements, receipts, a decade of financial favors I'd tracked not out of resentment but out of some instinct for self-preservation. I held it out. "These are the payments," I said. "Everything I've covered for you over the years." Dad snatched the folder with a triumphant sneer that died the moment he opened it. His face went pale as he read. Emergency repairs, $4,200. Credit card payments, $8,100. Chloe's car insurance, $2,400 annually. Medical bills, $6,800. The list went on for pages. Mom's voice dropped to a whisper. "You kept track?" "I kept boundaries," I said. "You just never noticed them until now." Heavy silence spread through the garage like spilled oil. "You're unbelievable," Dad said, his voice shaking. "We raised you. We fed you. You owe us respect." "I owe you honesty," I replied calmly. "And here it is. I'm done." Chloe's scream tore through the air. "You ruined everything!" Logan stepped between her and me. "Stop blaming her for your choices." Mom lunged forward, reaching for the folder like she could erase what it contained. "No one will believe this. No one will believe you chose strangers over family." I gestured around the room at the faces watching her, not with hostility, but with clarity, with disappointment, with truth. "They already do," I said. Dad's voice broke. "You'll regret this, Hannah." I shook my head, feeling lighter than I had in years. "No, I regret letting it go on this long." Chloe stared at Logan, tears streaming. "Please come back. This isn't who we really are." Logan looked at her with a sadness that felt final. It's exactly who you've always been. I just didn't want to see it. She whispered. So you're choosing her garage over me? I'm choosing a place where people treat each other with respect, he said. Mom, Dad, and Chloe stood there looking smaller than I'd ever seen them, exposed, deflated, with no audience left to perform for. I walked to the garage door and opened it wider, stepping aside. Leave, I said. For the first time in my life, they listened. Snow swallowed their footsteps as they walked back into the night, their silhouettes fading until the storm carried them away completely. Logan turned to me. You okay? I nodded, because something inside me had finally settled. Not anger, not triumph, just peace. I walked back into the warmth of my garage where my chosen family waited quietly, patiently. Let's eat, I said. And the room exhaled as one. The storm outside lasted through the night, but inside the garage, something had shifted permanently. After my biological family left, conversation slowly returned, gentler than before, but genuine. People helped clean up without being asked. Kids shared dessert with adults who weren't their grandparents. Logan stayed to help load leftover containers, pressing Mr. Rodriguez's phone number into my hand. He said his grandson is looking for an apprentice, Logan explained. Thought you might be interested in teaching. When everyone finally went home, I stood alone in my garage, surrounded by the comfortable mess of a real family dinner. Oil stains on concrete, folding chairs arranged in crooked rows, the lingering scent of cornbread and acceptance. I'd spent 3 decades trying to earn a place at a table that was never meant for me. It took losing that seat to realize I could build my own. 6 months later, Logan and I had settled into a comfortable friendship. He came by for Thursday dinners regularly and helped me teach basic mechanics to the neighborhood kids. When Chloe's text arrived that spring evening, "Can we talk? I miss you." I showed it to him over coffee. "What do you think?" I asked. He studied the message, then looked at me steadily. "I think some bridges burn completely, and that's exactly as it should be." I read the text one more time, then deleted it without responding. He was right. My garage is open every Thursday evening now. Community dinners that draw neighbors, kids learning basic mechanics, elderly folks who just want company. Logan comes by not as Chloe's ex-boyfriend, but as someone who understands what real family looks like. I never chased another invitation to their table. I didn't need to. I'd built something better. A space where being useful wasn't the price of belonging, where grease-stained hands were welcome, where the only requirement for family was showing up. If you've ever walked away from people who confused your value with your usefulness, you're not alone. Sometimes the family we choose loves us better than the family we're born into. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.